Hey guys, finally, we've reached season 7. Sorry this took way longer than I expected. But yeah, let's just dive right into it. The final season of the classic series, or depending on if you're American or British. I mean, yeah, as I've said many times, a lot of these episodes I never saw as a child because it took, like, it was 2006 by the time all of them came to the US. So it was that weird period where I was starting to lose interest in Thomas initially, growing out of it. So yeah, and also the music had a big impact on that too. But anyway, let's get into season 7. All right, first up, we've got Emily's New Coaches, and this is quite a pivotal episode because it introduced the first major female steam engine. I mean, Lady doesn't count because she's not canon. Um, I'm gonna have to put this one in C, unfortunately, because I think Emily's a fine character, but this episode falls into the trope that I really hate, where it's new character comes, somehow pisses off Thomas unintentionally. Thomas is mad. And then later on, through some reconciliation, through some bravery or whatever, Thomas is like, "Oh, big misunderstanding. We're now friends." And I say that particularly because I think it's the first time of that even more annoying trope where a new character takes Annie and Clarabelle for whatever reason. Thomas gets mad, and then it's not as bad here, but later on, it'd be like Stanley, Ryan, Ashima. Yeah, I just really don't like these types of episodes. It's just, yeah. But I'm putting it in C because the second half I feel like redeems this episode a bit. Yeah, it's a really great second half. Emily saving Oliver from the collision with Thomas. So yeah, my view on this episode is mixed. That's why I'm putting it in C. So yeah, I think Emily's a fine character. She's not my favorite, but I feel like she's a really good first female major character. I think before Emily, the most major female character was probably Mavis. Or I guess it would actually be Annie and Clarabelle, but they're coaches, so that raises a lot of questions. But yeah, I'm not saying that making female characters bossy is bad. I do feel like they went a little overboard later on with Emily. I just feel like sometimes they didn't really know what to do with her other than being girl. Yeah, but yeah, I like her fine, especially in this season. She's very kind, but also firm and clever. Intelligent. I'll put it that way. Yeah, and I think according to concept art, it was originally going to be Toby that was going to be rescued, but they changed it to Oliver. I really appreciate them doing that, giving Oliver some more screen time. There were a lot of instances of character switching in this season, I think. But yeah, there's Emily's New Coaches. I've just mixed thoughts on it. All right, next up we've got Percy Gets It Right, or is it Percy Saves the Day? Yeah. Anyway, let's see. I'm gonna put this one in B. Yeah. I really like how it's honestly a good lesson in that adults make mistakes too. The Fat Controller doesn't believe Percy, doesn't listen to him, and then at the end he acknowledges that. So yeah, I feel like that's a great thing, teaching children that adults aren't perfect either, and unlike say Middle Engine or something in the air, I mean, Fat Controller acknowledges that he was wrong. So yeah, and the scenery, especially at night, is really nice. Really spooky. I guess not spooky, but eerie. Put it that way. This episode makes you respect Percy a lot. Despite the other engines, blowing him off, he's like, "No, I think my friend's in danger. I'm gonna go look for him." So yeah, it's a really great episode as far as Percy's character. That's really all I can say about this one. Yeah, it's a good Percy episode. Brave Percy episode, I'll put it that way. Alright, next up we have Bill, Ben, and Fergus. So, I never saw this episode as a child. A lot of episodes I didn't see as a child from season 7 for reasons I've already talked about. But Salty's Stormy Tale was the only one I saw with Fergus as a child. So, yeah, I didn't realize that I guess this is supposed to be his debut episode. But even then, it implies he's been on Sodor for quite a while. I'm also going to put this one in B. Fergus can be a little annoying at times, but I feel like that's kind of the point. You're supposed to feel that, especially with Bill and Ben. I mean, yeah, they're very much being jerks, but you understand why. I always loved Fergus's design. Before I got his wooden railway model as a child, I mean, you could just use Trevor as a substitute. Fergus is a lot like Duke. He can be a little anal, I guess I could say. I'm sorry to use that word at times, but yeah, he's still a responsible engine. I mean, him saving Bill and Ben from the rockfall. Apparently, I think the reason Fergus never appeared again after season 7 was his model was damaged while filming the rockfall scene, apparently. And that explains quite a lot. I mean, I was always confused. They wrote a whole song about this engine. Yeah, he never appeared again. They probably had plans for him later on, but yeah, that totally makes sense. This episode has some funny moments. It's one of those where Michael Brandon's narration I've always found really funny, even though I'm not the biggest Brandon fan. Just the way, he laughed like, we should do everything wrong. But yeah, I feel like this is a good interaction between Bill, Ben, and Fergus. Something happens and then they get rescued and they learn their lesson. Alright, next up we have a very controversial one, the old bridge. And so, I said this on Twitter a while back. I think I really like the idea of this episode. It's a great story about overcoming PTSD and all that. But I don't think Skarloey was the right character to use for it. I feel like Peter Sam would have been a better character. Because of that, I'm gonna put it in C. Great moral, wrong character. That's pretty much my thoughts. I always got this episode confused with Trusty Rusty. Both season 7, both about bridge collapses, and the intros are both very similar. I'll say this. I really liked the expansion of the Skarloey Railway in season 7. I don't know why. It just looks so pretty. I mean, maybe it's because the colors have been increased since the last season. Obviously, nowhere near as good as season 4, but I really liked what they did with the Skarloey Railway in this season. The previous 2 seasons, they were only in like the last 2 or 3 episodes, so you just didn't really see much. But here, they incorporated them quite a lot. I pretty much already said all my thoughts about this episode. Again, great moral, wrong character. I think these trucks here are supposed to be like an Easter egg for Duncan Gets Spooked. I don't know if that was intentional. Maybe they were just trying to add those there because there was a previous accident or something. But even so, that's pretty clever. But yeah, this episode, I think it's got ups and downs. That's the best way I can put it. Next up, we have Edward's Brass Band. Yeah, so this one, this is just a sweet episode, I'll put it that way. How do I put this? It's just a simple episode, Edward's sad because he can't do what he was looking forward to do, but then he ends up helping anyway. So yeah, I like those kind of stories. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, is this the first time Edward's had an accident? At least in the show. He gets knocked over by Cranky, and by God, in the show, when engines fall on their side, that was always a big deal. Flying Kipper, Twin Trouble, sorta. Well, I guess Thomas and the Breakdown Train, but that was off screen. But yes, this is quite intense. Yeah, and of course, the storm. There's this whole idea that the storms you see in this season are all the same one. Also in like Toby and the windmill. But yeah, the storm visuals in this episode are really great. Correct me if I'm wrong, I said this before, but I think this is the first time you actually see real rain as opposed to just like mist or raindrops. Yeah, they probably added them either digitally or with a hose, but yeah, great job with that. Also, I didn't realize this till I watched it as an adult. Birdie's theme actually appears. Yeah, like we haven't heard that since what, season 3? Yeah, just these little things you don't notice when you're a child. For some reason, this shot here has always cracked me up. He just looks so stupid, like he had an aneurysm or something, like, ugh. This is a nice little episode. It's kind of like, Edward, Trevor, and the Really Useful Party. Just a short, simple, but sweet episode, I'll put it that way. Alright, next we have What's the Matter with Henry? Well, I'll tell you what's the matter with Henry. His episode is crap. You already know my thoughts on this one. I really do not like it. I'm gonna put it in E. I don't think it quite deserves F for a few small redeeming qualities, but yeah, as I said in my worst classic series episodes video, it's just a mean episode, mean spirited. Yeah, it just, the prank Thomas and Percy play, well, it's not even a prank, it's just downright cruelty, like bullying. And if it was someone like Diesel who did that, then yeah, I could buy that. But I just feel like Thomas and Percy, it's just way out of character for them, just extremely uncool. As I think I said this in the other video, it's like forcing a person in a wheelchair to climb up the stairs because you don't believe that they're disabled. Like, come on. And yeah, at least Thomas and Percy do get some sort of reprimand at the end. They're forced to take Henry's trucks. But yeah, I mean, that it should have been way more than that. Yeah, I mean, I'm probably hating on this a lot more than other people do, but it just for some reason, this concept really pisses me off. Yeah, the slight redeeming qualities this episode has, even though the hit era Henry's always like, they don't know what to do with him, so he's either sick or like a coward, I do really like how he tries to do his best despite being sick. That's really respectable. Yeah, and also Henry's season 7 theme is great. I wish we heard more of that. Yeah, I think his full theme, not counting, the snippets I've talked about, his full theme only appeared in seasons 1, 3, 4, and 6. I mean, 7, sorry. And I guess if you count the fishy theme in season 5, but, yeah, I love Henry's season 7 theme. It's just beautiful. Yeah, and also the quote, my boiler's grumbling. Maybe it's grumbling at you. Yeah, that made me laugh a bit, but still, it's just, this episode really rubs me the wrong way, and yeah, that's really all I can say. I just hate this episode. It's definitely the worst Henry episode. Alright, next up we have James and the Queen of Sodor. Unlike the previous episode, I love this episode, and you know what? I'm gonna put this one in S. I think it is a perfect James episode. Just, great use of his character. The prank Gordon plays is just so clever. In fact, that's the word I can describe it. It's a clever episode. Obviously, when you hear Queen of Sodor, you would think you'd be pushing like a royal yacht, but it turns out to be like this poopy old rusty boat. Yeah, it's just such a clever prank. I love it because it's not like mean-spirited, but at the same time, it puts James in his place. Yeah, yeah, just the visuals of James pushing this massive rust bucket around everywhere. It just, yeah, they just managed to emphasize how heavy it is, how dirty it is, how unsteady it is. Yeah, and like the sludge here. Oh, wow. I mean, what is this, like plaster? It's just the joke that James manages to do the job without getting clean, without getting dirty, only for Percy to completely ruin his paint at the end of the episode. Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with Michael Angelus's James voice. I think Brandon does good too, but I mean, Angelus gave him like this very high-pitched, shrill Liverpool accent. Like stuff and nonsense. I'm ready for anything. Yeah, it definitely does get on your nerves, but I feel like that's the point. I'm just trying to picture this episode if it was narrated by Baldwin, like, oh, stuff and nonsense, shiny and clean. I'm sorry. But, yeah, I love this episode. Kind of on a related note, I was talking about earlier, James's full theme doesn't appear after season 3. And this is an example I'm talking about, because his theme in this episode, it's, it has snippets of the old theme, but it's like a new arrangement. I don't know why they didn't go use his full theme. I would have loved to hear his theme in full, season 6, 7 style. But yeah, I mean, what else can I really say? I love this episode. I guess just a little note, at the end after James says like, oh, I'll be ready for anything. You hear all these engines groaning, and Duck's in the scene too. So the narrator doesn't establish Duck, acknowledge him, but the wiki does say it counts as a character appearance, a speaking role. So if that's the case, this technically is Duck's only speaking role in the whole season 7, and even then, it's debatable. I could have sworn he had more appearances this season, but I guess not. But anyway, this is a great James episode. Alright, this next episode's called The Refreshment Lady's Tea Shop, but it should really be called Alfred Pennyworth's Tea Shop, because Refreshment Lady sounds exactly like Michael Caine in the UK dub, don't you all think? Yeah, Mr. Wayne, while you're going around in that bat suit, I'm gonna go get me cakes out and start selling tea and cakes on the railway. Yeah, am I the only person who thinks that? The UK dub, she sounds exactly like Michael Caine. Yeah, George Carlin sounded a lot like some crazy Italian woman. So this is one that I didn't see as a child, and I actually had to rewatch it for this video because it had been a long time since I had actually seen it. Obviously, I remember the plot and all that, but I really didn't remember much from this one. And, having rewatched it, I was pleasantly surprised. Not that I had bad expectations, but I'm gonna put this one in B. There's not much to it, but I don't mean that in a bad way. It's one of those really simple feel-good stories, relaxing summertime stories, kind of like make someone happy. In fact, yeah, that's a great comparison. Yeah, it's just a simple story about Peter Sam finding a new restaurant for the refreshment lady. Yeah, I think the best aspects of this episode are just the visuals, like the Skarloey Railway is just beautiful. I mean, yeah, obviously not as much as season 4, but yeah, they really upped their game from the previous season. Very picturesque, especially like these waterfall shots, and I love the steam they added. Yeah, it's just so much more colorful. I mean, you can tell that some of these earlier shots are from the previous season, and they color corrected them. I wonder if they realized that how crappy season 6 looked, and so they just did a lot of color correction. But yeah, it looks really good. So, oh yeah, the storm scene too, and again, going back to that theory that it's all the same storm throughout the season, yeah, it's really well done. Yeah, that's pretty much all I can say. This is a really simple but sweet episode, I'll put it that way. Also, one more thing I forgot to mention, I think this is Peter Sam's first lead role since, I think the 4th season. Yeah, he didn't speak in Duncan Gets Spooked, season 5. And then season 6, he had, 1 or 2 lines, and I think it was Faulty Whistles. So, yeah, I hadn't realized that. And this definitely feels like a good episode for him. Just, his personality and all that. Alright, next up we've got the Spotless Record. Yeah, Spotless Record. I'm gonna have to put this one in C. Kinda because it has the same issue as What's the Matter with Henry, where, it's one of those episodes where Thomas and Percy play a prank for no justifiable reason, although to a far lesser extent than What's the Matter with Henry. In fact, as I said back then, that really wasn't a prank, that was more just being a complete asshole, where here, I guess they were trying to prove whether Arthur really was a perfect, spotless engine, but they didn't realize it would cause all this misery, like this huge crash, and you get that Thomas is genuinely sorry at the end, even though I never really liked that whole comparison of spotless records and friendships can both be mended. Like, what? I get the idea they're trying to say. I think it's, it doesn't matter if you're perfect or have some sort of clean slate. But then again, I feel like that message would have worked better had it been Arthur who was, extremely paranoid about being perfect. Kind of like Fergus. But yeah, I put it in C because the crash is brilliant. Yeah, just how things fly everywhere, everyone getting covered in fruit. I feel like out of all the characters introduced in season 7, especially on that New Friends for Thomas DVD, I think Arthur is the least memorable, but I don't mean that really in a bad way. I just think, compared to Murdoch, Spencer, or Emily, I think it's because he just doesn't really have a solid personality. His spotless record, it's just a fact about him. It's not like he's very arrogant or anything. But again, I mean, he does have some great episodes later on in this season. Yeah, Arthur is a character I like fine. He just kind of exists. I'll put it that way. I like seeing him, but there's just not really much to him. Anyway, yeah, so this episode's alright. If it weren't for... I just feel like that whole prank, Thomas and Percy's prank was just a bit too mean-spirited, but it's not as bad as some other episodes, and so that's why I'm putting it in C. And next up, we have Toby and the Windmill, and this one I'm definitely gonna put in S. It's kind of like, what's a good comparison? special funnel. It's one of those episodes with a very simple plot, but the atmosphere and emotion is just brilliant. I mean, the storm scenes in this episode, holy cow, they're really tense. Especially the effects of the lightning. I mean, was this lightning added digitally, or did they actually just hold a piece of, I don't know, tin foil cut out? Anyway, yeah, the effects in this episode are really great. Although I guess it does ask the question, why did the windmill burn down if it was raining? That never really understood. But anyway, yeah, kind of like with Edward's Brass Band, it's just a very simple story that they just put so much emotion into it. It's just, Toby loves this windmill, he's good friends with the miller, and then the storm destroys the windmill. He does his best to help build it back up. Yeah, it's kind of like, just trying to think of another good comparison. Yeah, I guess Thomas Percy, Old Slow Coach, is another good one. Yeah, it's just a wholesome episode, and I think the overall atmosphere is, and the music too, just that's what makes me put it in the S rank. I'm trying to remember if I saw this as a child. I don't think I did, but yeah, it's what else can I say? It's just fantastic. The Boulder themes use in this episode was a great choice, and I guess one thing I do remember a lot about this episode, it used a ton of stock footage, and, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but, yeah, it's, what else can I really say? I love this episode. Honestly, it's, I wouldn't say it's my utmost favorite of the season, but definitely, like, in the top 2 or top 3. Also, when rewatching all these episodes, how is it only right now I just noticed that, kind of like Rusty, Toby's face got bigger? I think it was in season 6. But, unlike Rusty, it's not very distracting. Anyway, so, yeah, Toby's Windmill. Alright, next up we've got Bad Day at Castle Lock. Bad Day at Castle Lock! I'm gonna put this one in the S tier. This is among my favorites of the season. Just, like, the overall idea, I think, is so clever. I remember when I was a kid, with Ghost Train, I always thought I think these are supposed to be the breakdown train in this shot, but yeah, it kind of does look like a dinosaur amongst the dark mist, so maybe they got inspired by that. So yeah, it's just a very clever idea for a Donald and Douglas episode, them being Scottish and Loch Ness Monster turns out to just be Harvey in the breakdown train. Yeah, just very creative. I just love all the visuals of this episode, the dark loch, the mist, and just... Yeah, this lake is such a beautiful set. I always thought it funny, this tower right here, for some reason, to me, it looks like one of those things you'd buy, like, for wargaming, like board games, or, Dungeons and Dragons, something you 3D print, or, like, one of those things you put in a fish tank. Yeah, I don't know why, it's just something about that tower, but anyway. One thing I really like is that in the US dub, Donald and Douglas's Hartshorn theme, I actually really love that arrangement. Obviously, it's not as good as Mike and Junior's, but it's one of the few character themes from the hit era that I actually think is almost up on the original. Yeah, and just trying to think of anything else. Just funny twin banter. Is this the only episode where Donald and Douglas speak in this season? I think it might be. I could have sworn they had more appearances, but yeah, I guess not. This is an episode I never saw as a kid because it was like 2006, I believe, when this finally came to the U.S. It was on that Thomas's Halloween Adventures DVD, and it always got stuck, that DVD I saw. So, yeah, it was kind of hard to see the full episode. But, yeah, this is just such a great, spooky Scottish episode. All right, next up we've got Rheneas and the Roller Coaster. So this is a controversial one, like the Old Bridge. I'm going to put it in the same rank as the Old Bridge, C. I like it more than the Old Bridge, but it has the same issue where the overall idea for the story, I think, is brilliant. Especially because when you think about it, like, these kids are having the time of their lives, like, having so much fun, being on, like, an out-of-control train where they could have died in so many places. I mean, the teacher's reactions just say it all. That's just so funny. But the problem is, the reason that the train goes out of control is just the tracks are under repair. Like, okay, then why doesn't Rheneas just stop? Why did he continue going down the line? Like, especially with children on board. Like, wouldn't he get in major trouble? Like, do you guys see what I mean? So I say that because all you could do is just rewrite the episode where instead of like tracks being under repair, maybe Rheneas's brakes suddenly stop working, or the coach comes uncoupled, or it's just some runaway thing. Whereas, yeah, it's kind of like Rusty to the Rescue, where this small element completely screws with like I don't want to say realism, but do you guys know what I mean? It's something that's just so distracting that you just can't wrap your head around. It just makes no sense. So, I mean, I'd love to put this episode in A. I think it's really funny, but just for that reason, it's... Yeah, all they did was... What do they do? Like, tilt the camera to make it look like a roller coaster? Yeah, like, does going down these tracks suddenly mean that the Earth starts shifting and the rails start going, like, upside down and all that? But, yeah, you can see my issue. Again, though, I just... It's just such a funny episode. That's why I'm putting it in C. It just has such a baffling concept for why the train goes out of control, but still, it's just so funny. Also, I really like how they use Rheneas as the main character. I think Peter Sam originally was the main character for this episode, but it was great that they gave a lead role to Rheneas again. He was kind of underused, and naturally that was because, in Season 4 he was under repair for most of it, but yeah, a great episode to give to Rheneas. Yeah, just to think of anything else. It's a funny episode. I just feel like it could have used some rewrites. Alright, next up we've got Salty's Stormy Tale. And this is an interesting one because it was one of the only 3 episodes in Season 7 that had Michael Brandon's narration, but with the original music. And when I say that, it was on this VHS called Thomas and the Jet Engine. So the first half was Alec Baldwin Season 6, and then the second half was Season 7, Michael Brandon, but with the original Mike and Jr. music. So, I mean, that to me just raises so many questions. Like, if they were able to do it here, why couldn't they just have it where Season 7 on DVD or home media was the original music, and then when it was on TV, they changed the music? Especially since most of the Season 7 DVDs had only Season 7. So, yeah, I mean, as I said before, I think Hit was trying to get Season 8 out by the time Season 7 came to the US, so I can understand for TV, changing up the music, but what they should have done is just put all the Season 7 episodes out on DVD first, and while Season 8 was airing, then worry about airing it on TV. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, it just raises so many questions. It really annoys me how they, just some of these decisions they made. But anyway, so Salty's Stormy Tale, I think a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this, but I'm actually going to put this in S. I think the storm scenes are brilliant. Just the atmosphere, the visuals, it's really intense. I feel like a lot of people don't like this episode because of the, Thomas and Percy making fun of Salty. I don't know, maybe they think it's childish, but I do think, to be fair, it is a good lesson to teach children, and I feel like it's, done in a pretty good way. I mean, yeah, it also shows that, Thomas and Percy weren't being, like, jerks. They just were having fun, but they didn't realize they were insulting Salty. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a very valuable lesson for children. But yeah, as I said before, I never saw Bill, Ben, and Fergus as a child, so this was the only time I saw him. So yeah, he just suddenly appeared, and I'm like, who's this? Like, Trevor get repainted? But yeah, I mean, the storm scenes are just brilliant. I mean, the rain, just the wind, the explosions, also just like the lighting, especially the shots of the captain behind the glass. Like, wow, this cinematography is just so great. This shot right here of, I believe it's supposed to be like a power generator. When I was a kid, I always thought that was like an overhead shot of the shed exploding. But, yeah, I mean, they truly captured the atmosphere of a really intense storm. It's anything else like it. It's a really great Salty episode. He's very much a hero, and yeah, I love this one. Alright, next up we've got Snow Engine. Now this is an episode I do remember seeing as a child. Yeah, so I'm trying to think. What should I put this in? Should it be? I'm gonna put it in B. Yeah. Episodes with snowman can usually have really bad results. But this one I think is pretty good. The concept, it's a bit silly, but it kind of embraces that. I just think it's a really funny episode of Oliver realizing that snow can be magical. I mean, yeah, I feel like the humor kind of makes up for
That
this.
could have been a little
It's great
smoother.
seeing Oliver get a lead role again after, yeah, I think he only made cameos in season 6, so great seeing him have another lead role. Yeah, I mean, just the sets of this episode with the snow are great. I always found it funny how Brandon must have took the word Great Western but thought it meant like cowboy. So he gave him like I'm a Great Western engine. I shouldn't have to shiver. But yeah, the crash is really funny. The line like, "Is there a problem, Mr. Oliver?" "Yeah, there is." Yeah, so I mean, this episode's nothing special, but I do like it. Especially the end. Oh, poor Toad. Like, it's weird. Oliver starts off by hating snow. Toad thinks it's magical, and at the end, it's the reverse. Perhaps, Mr. Oliver. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is this the last appearance of Oliver until season 12? Yeah, that's quite something. Alright, next up, we've got Something Fishy, and I'm gonna put this one in A. I think the crash in this episode where Thomas goes off the pier is just hilarious. It's yeah, it's kind of like the world's strongest engine. It's just so quick but insane. I mean, the splash and yeah, and also the trucks just being like, "He's falling in the water." Yeah, it's just a funny episode. I mean, I guess that does beg the question. The situation with the points. How did the trucks keep going if Thomas went the other track? Wouldn't he be still attached to them? So wouldn't he drag the truck with him, derailing it? I don't know. That's just technical nitpicking. But as I said before, Arthur wasn't anything special in Spotless Record, but here they developed him a lot more. It shows he loves fish. He's very hardworking. So yeah, I think this is a better Arthur episode. For some reason, I don't know what it is. His paintwork looks so different. It looks brighter, like a bright red. Maybe it was just the DVD I had, or I always found it funny. You can see the other newbies of the season in this episode, even though some of them hadn't been introduced yet. Like, there's Spencer, there's Murdoch. I also really like how they dyed the water green, all this algae. It really does look like real seawater. Yeah, I was trying to think of anything else. I remember as a kid, I must have seen this at least once. I got it confused with Fish from season 8. That also involves Arthur and Fish. But yeah, I mean, this is a really good episode. It's a nice callback to Thomas Goes Fishing and just funny crash. And yeah, it's a really good Arthur episode. Alright, next up we've got The Runaway Elephant. I'm gonna put this one in S. I don't know what other people think of it, but I just think this is a really funny runaway story. It's, yeah, just a crazy concept, but I just love it. First off, it's kind of a trick. You think he's gonna be pushing a live elephant around, but it's just a statue. So yeah, when you hear the title, Runaway Elephant, you think, oh, did the elephant escape from the circus? They have to catch it. But no, he's pushing a statue around, and it ends up, running out of control. Yeah, it's just a fun idea, I think. Especially like at the end where Duncan crashes, the elephant flies in the air and lands in the pond. But then they decide, oh, that's actually a nice location for it. So it's one of the... I love these types of episodes where character screws up, but it turns out it's not so bad after all. Something good came out of it. Yeah, I like that concept. Yeah, this is just a funny Duncan episode. I love the William Tell Overture theme again. Unlike Rheneas and the roller coaster, you can actually see why this train started running away. Yeah, it's definitely something Duncan would do, not collect the brake van. I feel like what would have made, I mean, of course they wouldn't do this, but what would have made this episode so funny is like this arch right here, or any other sort of bridge or overpass. Like the elephant hit it, and either his head or his trunk came off. Yeah, I mean, you keep expecting that to happen. Yeah, it's just great model work. Again, I'm sounding like a broken record. It's just such a funny episode. I do think Michael Brandon does go a little over the top sometimes, especially the driver, when they're about to hit the tractor on the crossing. He's
Look
like,
out!
"Look out!" I mean, what the hell was that? Is the driver retarded or something? But, I mean, that's not too much of an issue. Yeah, again, what else can I really say? It's just such a funny idea, great concept. Yeah, great Duncan episode. Alright, next up we've got Peace and Quiet. And as I've said before, I've always had a strange fascination with Murdoch. I think it's just his design and the color. I think a lot of people don't like his color, but I'm in the minority. I love this orange. Like, it's just something about it. It looks like macaroni and cheese. Originally, I think he was supposed to be like BR Maroon, but they probably changed it because Arthur was already that. But yeah, I think that was a great choice. He really does stand out. So Peace and Quiet. I'm debating A or B. It's a very simple story, but you know what? I'm gonna put this in A. Yes, I might be nostalgia biased, but I've just always really liked this episode. It's a very relaxing episode. I mean, ironically, yeah, it's very peaceful. uh, yeah, just something about the. I think a lot of it has to do with Michael Angelus's narration. It was very much like ASMR style, particularly the end line. And I think a lot of people would disagree, but I feel like Murdoch's quite a nice character change for once. He's a big engine, but he's also very well, I guess I wouldn't say kind. He is quite rude, but he's a very big, but he's also very timid. Very shy. And he likes his peace and quiet. So he's a gentle giant. And yeah, I'm trying to. I don't think we've really had those before, so that's a really nice change. I really like how Salty and Harvey are the ones he has to share the shed with. Yeah, first off, just these random new characters, and also they're just personalities are. You can see why Murdoch would get stressed out being with them. Yeah, it wouldn't really work the same if it was like Thomas and Percy, but I think Bill and Ben would have been a great choice too. In fact, that's what I did when I did my realistic adaptation of this episode. Yeah, I mean, it's just I'm sure everyone has like that one character that they love, but they can't really explain why. So Murdoch is mine. Again, I don't think he quite makes my top 10 list, but yeah, definitely like with between 15 and 10. And yeah, I guess the message of this episode is supposed to be like loud noises can be anywhere, even in the most peaceful settings, and you just learn to deal with it, I guess. I also love Murdoch's facial expressions. It's just something about it. It's just so funny. But again, this episode just has like this very relaxing feel to it. I think the music in this episode is brilliant. It really does capture Murdoch's character perfectly. The theme is very bombastic, emphasizing his size, but it's also very luscious and well relaxing. Yeah, that's I could put it. Big and relaxing, and that perfectly captures his character. And yeah, I wish we saw more of Murdoch. I don't know what happened to him. He just kind of disappeared. Like out of all those characters introduced in season 7, excluding Fergus, obviously, he seemed to get the shortest end of the stick later on, kind of like Arthur. Yeah, I think he had 2 speaking roles in this season, the other being Best Dressed Engine. Season 8, I think he had a non-speaking role in the Magic Carpet episode, and then he kind of just disappeared. Like, I think he was one of those engines that laughed at Whiff, but he didn't appear again until like 1 or 2 appearances in season 12 where he spoke, and then that was it. He just vanished completely. And I'm wondering if like Hero unofficially took his place. I mean, honestly, they're both very similar, both physically and character-wise. Big engine with, especially with the smoke deflectors, but also very calm and majestic and peaceful. Yeah, so I wonder if Hero took over him. Unlike Fergus and Trevor, I always used the big city engine to portray Murdoch until I got his wooden railway toy. But yeah, I feel like if I didn't have a lot of nostalgia, I'd probably put this episode like in a B because again, it's a very simple story, but I think I really like this one. Again, it's just a really great, relaxing, and I guess kind of funny episode. It's just a really relaxing season 7 episode. I feel like this episode emphasizes how season 7 had like this calm and smooth atmosphere compared to season 6. I mean, yeah, there were crashes and all that, but overall, the vibes were just a lot more mellowed out, and yeah, I like it for that. Kind of smoothed out. Alright, next up we've got Fergus Breaks the Rules. And I'm also going to put this one in A. I don't know what other people think about this one. I wonder if... I think this is the one that establishes that Diesel's now a permanent engine on Sodor, but... In fact, I referenced that in my Engines of Sodor episode with him. But yeah, I put this one in A because I feel like, how do I put this? It's dirty work meets Stepney Gets Lost. Like the second half of this episode, the atmosphere, the sets, the spooky vibes. Oh man, it is just so great. Yeah, this is a lot like Stepney Gets Lost. I mean, it's weird. The sets of Fergus, like on this old abandoned track, with all these trees, that's way scarier than the smelters scene. I find that ironic. And as I said in the previous video, even though they have a very short appearance here, Ari and Bert are almost back on that season 5 scary level. Like, they dropped in season 6 to just regular bullies. But here, I mean, just the little we see of them, yeah, that would definitely scare me as a kid. So yeah, good job on that. Yeah, a lot of it is just like the sets. I mean, even these shots of like Thomas looking happy, these still scare me quite a bit. Something to do with the lighting and the atmosphere. Yeah, season 7 did a really good job with these spooky sets. Obviously not as good as season 5, but yeah, it still managed to capture a lot of eerie shots. And I also really like the message, even though I guess Fergus is a bit dumb for thinking he's being sent away forever, but at the same time though, I really like how it emphasizes how the Fat Controller wasn't cross, he was very worried. I don't know, episodes like that I just always really like, because it shows, like, his true nature, he really deeply cares about his engines and all that. Yeah, and is this Fergus's last appearance? I guess it is, yeah, he only appeared 3 times, and as I said before, apparently it was because his model was damaged. Yeah, I mean, I've always liked Fergus. It's just such a unique character. I mean, model alone is just really interesting. All these like intricate workings. The flywheel and all that. Yeah, yeah. I mean, just what else can I say? Again, the spooky sets are really downright terrifying. Honestly, this is almost on the level of like Haunted Henry. I mean, not quite, but yeah, the mist, these spooky trees. Something about the moss, too, really emphasizes how eerie this place is. So, I feel like the Diesel plot, that's kind of what drags it down a little bit. He just shows up out of nowhere, is like, oh, I'm back, bitches, and then, yeah, you don't really... They say he's going to send him to the smelters instead of sending him away, but I feel like we just needed that episode in between where it's like establishes why Diesel's staying permanently, and that's what I kind of did in Engines of Sodor. Ignoring that subplot, I think this is a fantastic episode. Just, yeah, really great atmosphere. Next up, we've got Bulgy Rides Again. And let me think. I'm going to put this one in A, too. I think it's a really good redemption for Bulgy. I always thought the chicken plot of them, like, re-going back onto the bus and causing havoc, I don't know. Some reason I just felt kind of silly. Like, how did they not notice all these chickens on the bus when it was driving? But that said, though, I think it's a really great redemption story. I mean, Bulgy... It could have easily just been like Bulgy's put back to work and then he's, rude again and has to learn his lesson. But no, they actually genuinely make it feel like Bulgy's a redeemed character. I particularly like the ending where he decides, you know what, passengers are just not for me. I want to change. And he becomes a vegetable bus. And yeah, they convert him back later. But still, I thought that was a really neat twist. Yeah, it's kind of like a character realizing that his life is just not the type he wanted, so he decides to have a change. He has that arc. That's just really great. Yeah, this is another episode that was on that Jet Engine DVD with the original music and Brandon's narration. Yeah, I mean, Bulgy's model, I mean, I just love it. The red and his theme, too. Bulgy's weird because he had, like, the longest time between being introduced and then getting his own theme. What was it, like... 4 seasons, yeah, season 3 to season 7. I used to think it was Cranky, just 1 season, but no, yeah, I guess it is Bulgy. So yeah, this is a really great redemption story for Bulgy. I would like to see something like this done for Bulstrode, especially now that he's in All Engines Go. Like, I don't know why we ever saw Bulstrode again, but yeah, there's Bulgy Rides Again. Alright, next up we've got Harold and the Flying Horse. I'm going to put this one in S. I really like this one. This was the first episode on that Jet Engine DVD where it was, Michael Brandon, but with the original music. Yeah, I mean, I still remember watching this, because the previous three episodes had all been Alec Baldwin. Boy, what it was such a jarring change when suddenly you had this voice going like, Harold the helicopter. Yeah, I mean, it's just such a different narration style than Baldwin. Yeah, so I just feel like this is a really clever episode about a non-rail character. Not even non-rail, like non-road. I think this is the first time you got an episode dedicated to I guess maybe Cranky Bugs, but yeah, it's great giving Harold a lead role. And just like the whole idea of flying horse, it's just so clever how they work that in. Obviously, you think horses can't fly, but Percy sees them flying later on. Pegasus, yeah. I feel like this episode really captures the best of season 7 as far as visually. It's just so colorful, or at least compared to season 6. Yeah, I think that's because there's a lot of green in this episode. The garden party, grass. Yeah, another one of those relaxing summer episodes, and just the music. Yeah, it's This is why I've always preferred season 7 over season 6. I mean, story wise, it could be variable, but just visually, it's just miles better to look at than season 6. And a lot of it is stock footage, but I don't really care about that. Yeah, this is just a really clever story. Great seeing Harold get a lead role. Alright, next up we've got the grand opening. I'm gonna put this one in A. I feel like this is a much better way of doing the better late than never message, where sometimes being late can be a good thing. Yeah, I just think this episode's really funny. Yeah, especially the interactions between Sir Topham Hatt and Lady Hat. Yeah, it kind of giving me Sir Topham Hatt's holiday vibes. Kind of like the old bridge. I don't know if Scarloey was quite the right character to use, but unlike that episode, it's not as distracting here. Although I will say, the Fat Controller keeps getting annoyed that Scarloey's always late, but he clearly has no control over it, like, all the work he's been given. But I get the sense maybe at the end the Fat Controller understands that. Not much I can really say, just another funny Fat Controller gets in trouble episode. Yeah, as I said with the other narrow gauge episodes in this season, the Skarloey Railway is just so beautiful. I particularly like the different Skarloey Railway themes they have. It kind of serves well as like a not alternate, but like version 2 of this railway's theme. Yeah, I don't think the original theme was heard at all in this season. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, for some reason these sets, they just look. You can tell they're simple, but they're also so realistic. It's kind of hard to explain why. Maybe it's how they laid out the dirt, but anyway. Yeah, this is just a funny episode. Just classic Fat Controller humor. And next up, we've got Best Dressed Engine. Yeah, this one, I'm gonna put it in B. I don't really have many thoughts on this one. It's kind of a typical Gordon gets embarrassed episode. Maybe the driver just couldn't see, but, when he says, like, no, Gordon, you can't stop, you have to keep going. Well, if you can't see the line, that's kind of a serious thing. Like, in fact, he did crash. He crashed into Trevor. Again, maybe the driver just couldn't see the banner, but yeah, that part always confused me. But, yeah, I don't really have many thoughts on this one. I think it's got some funny moments. It's pretty good. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I think I did see this one as a kid. It was the last episode on I think, what was it? Hooray for Thomas. I love seeing Murdoch again. That's the highlight. Some of these decorations, it's funny. Gordon looks like one of the most normal ones. He wasn't even supposed to have one. I mean, just look at these other decorations. Just weird. But anyway, yeah, this is a fine episode. I'm gonna put it in B. Alright, next up we've got another Gordon episode, and this episode is going in the S tier. I've said this before, but I think Gordon Spencer is one of, if not my favorite of this season. Yeah, it's, well, first off, this episode is quite special in many ways for me. It was the first season 7 episode I ever saw, and also it was my first exposure to Michael Angelis, because it was the first episode on that New Friends for Thomas DVD. And yeah, I just thought he was a guest narrator until I realized there was a whole different UK dub years later. And yeah, as I said before, I actually really like Michael Angelis, but it's a topic for another day. Yeah, so what I love about this episode, it's Kind of the same reason as, those episodes, in SpongeBob, Squidward, definitely a not as likable character, but, you give him an adversary, and that kind of, like, brings him down, humbles him a bit, and you can see the difference. And I probably said this before, like Squidward and Squilliam, it's Gordon and Spencer. Yeah, so Gordon's quite an arrogant, pompous character, and then you bring in an engine who's even more so, and, it humbles Gordon down, and it makes everyone realize, what differs between these two characters. Yeah, I mean, Spencer is just a beautiful design. This was the episode that introduced me to Class A4's, the engine that the Mallard was. And it's because of that, it's my favorite steam engine. Yeah, I mean, obviously, there are a few technical differences, like his front is not angled like the real A4s, probably so they could get the eyes working, but even with the deviations, he's still such a great looking character. I remember the first time I got this DVD before I watched it, this thing right here, I thought those were like propellers, with Spencer on the cover. Spencer was really the first, correct me if I'm wrong, he was the first ever steam engine antagonist. Before this we just had like evil diesels or grumpy road characters. So that was definitely a nice change, and that's why I really liked him being used in Hero of the Rails. And it's funny because this was the, because of how the show ended up after this, this was the only episode I saw with Spencer as a child. And even then, he wasn't in that New Engines song at the end of the DVD, so I was always confused as to that. Maybe because he's only a visiting engine, but yeah, so I mean, I love Spencer, and I was so thrilled when I found out there were more episodes with him. And then you can imagine how even more thrilled I was when I found out he was coming back for CGI, and honestly, that he's been almost a main character since then. Yeah, so I just love Spencer. I mean, the story is very basic. I mean, Spencer doesn't listen to advice, and then runs out of water. But I don't know, it's just something about the way it's written with Gordon that makes it a lot more entertaining. I think a lot of it just has to do with Spencer and Gordon's interactions. Yes, I might have a leaky tank. Something about Spencer's facial expressions, I just love them. It just fits his pompous character so well. I think the episodes where Gordon's the hero is like so wholesome because again, it has to do with this arrogant character being humbled down, and you see what he's like deep down inside. Very caring engine. And here it's like him showing that, yeah, he's arrogant too, but he's still very, he can get sad too, he can get jealous, but, he's very useful. What defines a really useful engine? I don't know, I'm going on a tangent, but yeah, so there's Gordon and Spencer. I love Spencer's theme. Yeah, I'm just trying to think of anything else. I guess that's pretty much it. What else can I say? I love this episode. Well, I guess I'll say this. Even though it's unrealistic, I mean, steam engines take a while to speed up. I just always loved how the way they shot it, Spencer just suddenly shoots into action like a rocket. Yeah, that was just always so cool. Next up, we've got Not So Hasty Puddings. Pudding. What is pudding? The British definition. In the US, pudding usually just means like chocolate pudding, something gooey. But is pudding like any sort of dessert in the UK? Oh, someone tell me that. And I have to say, even though I'm half British, I absolutely hate Christmas pudding. I cannot stand it. It's not the tradition itself. I love setting it on fire, but my God, the cake itself, it's just, what is it? It tastes like, yeah, am I the only one? So that's one aspect of British culture I'm not really a fan of. But anyway, Not So Hasty Puddings, or Not So Hasty Cakes, I guess is the US title. Yeah, so I kind of like the Refreshment Lady's tea stand. I had to rewatch this one because it had been a long time since I saw it. Yeah, I'm gonna put this one in B, but I think it would be a high B. What I really like about this episode is it really develops the relationship between Thomas and Elizabeth. Like when she first appeared, Elizabeth's just, as I said before, a grumpy old grouch, and here, I mean, she really does get on Thomas's nerves. I mean, yeah, she is quite rude, but what I really like is it seems that Elizabeth kind of has that arc, realizing that Thomas is reliable after all, and they kind of have a reconciliation, I guess. Yeah. Also, like, despite Thomas not getting along with Elizabeth, he still recognizes that, it wasn't her fault. They kind of have develop a respect for each other. So yeah, I really like that aspect. The snow sets, like usual, are really nice. Yeah, I mean, is this the only snow No, I guess not. They had Snow Engine, but one thing I do notice about this episode is that the stock footage, there's a lot of it. And yeah, season seven's notorious for having a lot of stock footage. People theorize probably because it was made while they're making the Jack spinoff, but I mean, it's kind of hit or miss for me. I think season one stock footage in this era is really distracting. That said, though, the flying kipper shot at the beginning, yeah, you've got Henry in his old shape, but at least they edited it, to have the snow, and honestly, it looks quite pretty. I just think they could have found another shot of Henry. But, I think what stands out the most is this shot right here. I think this is from It's Only Snow, where you can see Toby. And man, this is just probably one of the worst uses of stock footage ever. It would be like if you had an episode with, say, let's see a good comparison. It would be like if you had an episode with James, and you needed a shot of just James going by himself, but you put in like a shot of James being chased by Edward from Old Iron in the middle of James just, traveling somewhere. It's almost on that level. Like, could they not find any other shot of Thomas in a snowy environment? Just, yeah, Toby just suddenly appears out of nowhere. And also, for some reason, Terrence rescuing Elizabeth, that just seems to go by so quick. It's like rushed. You can understand what I mean if you watch it. It's just really too fast paced, the editing. But aside from those issues, yeah, I feel like if it weren't for those, I'd probably put this in A. For a while, I used to think this was the last season 7 episode, but I guess there are two more. I think maybe it's because it was the last produced, but yeah, this is a nice episode. It's a really good, snow rescue episode, I'll put it that way. The story is really nice. I just feel like some of the technical aspects are not so great, but yeah, I like this one. Alright, next up we've got Trusty Rusty. This one's also a bit controversial. I'm gonna put it in C. I feel like a lot of people would put it there. The big issue a lot of people have is that Duncan seems to forget what happened in rock and roll. Like, his relationship with him and Rusty just went out the window. And yeah, I do agree with that to a certain extent. He's like, how would you know? You're just a diesel. Well, yeah, what happened to the reconciliation from rock and roll? But I'm wondering, it's not that big of an issue for me because, unlike some other episodes, it's not like the main theme of the episode. It's just that one line. So you could easily just change that line and it would work pretty well. And I say that because that's the only time in the episode he says specifically that, diesels don't know anything. Yeah, because the other line he says about Rusty's like, oh, Rusty makes everything seem more dangerous than it really is. I feel like that's the intent they were going for, Rusty's being too careful about safety. So yeah, I feel like if you just remove that first line, that would pretty much fix it completely. I mean, there's some other minor issues with this episode. I just feel like Duncan's crew is just really stupid. Removing the sign, yeah, and also, like, him forgetting coal and all that. Well, yeah, these are kind of just, like, dumb issues. Like, but other than that, yeah, like, this episode's alright. That's why I put it in C. The bridge collapse is really impressive. Even though it's not realistic, because his basis goes like, 15 miles per hour tops. I do really like him, zooming to the rescue with his theme blaring in the background. Super Rusty. Yeah, I'm just trying to think of anything else. Yeah, there's just not much to this episode. It's character ignores advice and gets in trouble. That's pretty much it. And finally, we have 3 cheers for Thomas, or as I've always known it, hooray for Thomas. So, let's see, I'm gonna put this one in B. Yeah, I think there's not much to it, like, on the surface, but I think it's weird. It feels like this episode, it wasn't intended to be like a finale to the classic era, but unintentionally, it kind of comes off like that. Just some of the, first off, Thomas and Bertie racing, you're referencing one of the most iconic early episodes. and also the fact that, would they have a race again? That was the big question. So yeah, that feels like an appropriate thing to end this era on. And also just Thomas getting a medal for being the best engine, really useful. Yeah, I mean, that definitely has some finality to it too. And yeah, I mean, the message is kind of like, you don't have to be a winner to be really useful. Yeah, I think that's a really good message. So yeah, I don't really have many thoughts on this one, but I do think, whether intentional or not, it is quite a soft end to this classic era. I do wonder if they knew this was going to be the last episode of this era, like David Mitten, or had it already been finished after he left. But yeah, so I guess it's weird. It's kind of hard to tell because it's not a very epic episode, but again, it does have some elements that would fit, a final episode very well. Yeah, so the "Let's Have a Race" instrumental I absolutely love, and yeah, just seeing Thomas and Birdie race again, yeah, I mean, as I said before, it's a nice way to conclude this 7 season classic era. Yeah, anything else? I mean, this is it, the final classic episode. I guess not. Yeah, I mean, there's not much to this episode. I didn't really remember it as a child, and I know I saw it because I remember seeing the DVD, but yeah, so I think this is a pretty nice, calm end to the classic era of Thomas. Alright, so this is probably going to be a very controversial opinion, but honestly, I think season 7 is probably one of the most underrated seasons. Yeah, I mean, I do know a lot of people don't like it because, yeah, it kind of does feel like a transitional season. The stories are a lot simpler, but yeah, especially having rewatched these in the original format, UK narration and O'Donnell and Campbell's music, I was able to just focus on the stories themselves and, the visuals as well. And yeah, I mean, I would still put it, second to last in that season's ranking video, but yeah, I just gained so much more appreciation for this series. It just feels like classic Thomas. I mean, yeah, not like classic as in like railway series, but I've said so many times there's a lot of aspects that brings it up from the previous season, like the color, the sets, the music. Honestly, one thing that really confirms this for me is the fact that What's the Matter with Henry is really the only episode I thoroughly dislike. I mean, the ones like in the C category here, a lot of these, a lot of people don't like, especially the old bridge. But, I mean, that's mainly because, yeah, like I was saying, they have stuff like they have brilliant concepts but executed not very well, or it's like a great episode but one aspect really drags it down. It's weird. A lot of these episodes are like, here's a good example. The Last Jedi from Star Wars. That's a movie which I think had amazing ideas, but executed them in a horrible way. So, that film is probably one of the most frustrating movies I've ever seen because I keep going back and forward, high to low with my opinions. So, yeah, a lot of these episodes are like that. But, yeah, I mean, some of the other ones, I mean, this season has really good humor, I've noticed when rewatching them. Like the grand opening, and also just some of the concepts alone. Like, as I said, Renee's on the roller coaster, not a great episode, but the concept of like these children being like, we're in danger, and that just cracks me up. I mean, as I've said before, I think the reason that, for me particularly, and I'm sure a lot of other people as well, it's just the fact that the season has a lower view because of how, the way it was brought to the U.S. was just completely disorganized. First they just threw him a Michael Angelis DVD, and then, 3 episodes on a Baldwin DVD with Michael Brandon. And then the rest of them, when they finally got to it, they put in the new music. And I should emphasize, Hartshorn and Welch on their own, I think they're fine. Yeah, I mean, I do think their music is a little oversimplified. I don't know what it is. It's something about the instruments they use, but yeah, I think that their music on their own is fine, season 8 onwards, but here's my issue. I mean, it's the fact that O'Donnell and Campbell, you can't really surpass that. And it's the fact that it just feels like the hit was trying to Hit must not have liked this season, probably because, their priority was season 8 with the new format, but, they still had this one final classic series to get out. So they just did this weird thing where they shoved it in between, but also like, putting in the new music to make it seem like new series episodes. And for TV, I that's questionable, but okay, I can understand that. But again, going back to Star Wars, it's kind of like George Lucas and the special editions. I think the special editions are really fascinating, and yeah, not all the choices are great, but they do have some. I just find it fascinating seeing how trying to better bridge the new trilogies together, and adding stuff that maybe he couldn't do back then. But then the problem is you can't see the original. It's like you're changing history, and that's kind of how I feel about season 7. Yeah, the Hartshorn and Welch music is nice, but what was the point? And that's why I say, for DVD, they should have just put them all out with the original music and Brandon. Seeing some fan edits where they somehow put in Michael Brandon but with the original music has honestly made me appreciate the narrator more. I never disliked him per se, I should put that out there. I just felt like his voice was a bit too shrill, like really hard on the ears. So I guess what I'm saying is, he was kind of over enthusiastic. And yeah, as I said before, some of his character voices were just way too over the top or just didn't fit. Um, but, at the same time, though, I'm gaining more of an appreciation for him. He clearly loved doing the role, and yeah, just so much energy. I just feel like, yeah, he could have maybe toned it down a little bit. I think Rhaenyra's voice he did is probably the worst. But yeah, I never disliked Michael Brandon. I just feel like a lot of my view is just tainted by, again, the new music. When he's with Mike and Junior's music, honestly, he's not bad. And I said that in the other video. I'm wondering if the reason they didn't incorporate any of the original themes in the new series, and, in that case, Season 7 US narration as well, was because maybe they didn't want to have to, like, I don't know, maybe it was something where they would have to pay Mike and Junior royalties or something. I don't know. That's probably why they changed the main theme too. But, yeah, I just think that was a really stupid decision. But, the season as a whole, I just think it's so underrated. The sets, I noticed a lot more when watching. The sets, the atmosphere, I already talked about the color, but yeah, the Skarloey Railway particularly looks really nice, especially compared to the last season. Yeah, just trying to think of anything else I can say. They used, like, all the classic characters, Oliver, Donald, and Douglas. They didn't really do anything with Duck, but yeah. So again, it would still be like second to last in that ranking video. But honestly, I've just gained such a better liking for season 7. Yeah. I just think the fact that I didn't see a lot of these episodes, it just really distorted my view of this season as a kid. So yeah. Yeah, it's the last Classic Thomas series. Yeah, I guess that's it. That's the final thoughts on video for this series of videos. Again, I'm sorry that this took like 5 videos to make. I wanted to do 5 through 7 in one video, but again, it would have just been so long, especially considering how long this video took to make. But so I'm probably not gonna do the future series, 8 onwards. Just the fact that I just haven't really seen many of them, that's kind of when my interest in Thomas ended. And, from what I have seen, there's some good ones, but they're just so hard to differentiate. They're just all a blur. And, so maybe I'll do something where maybe I watch them again, record my reactions, but yeah, I just really don't want to have to do these videos for seasons 8 through 12. I just think it would be really tedious, and, the rankings I would have to like adjust my filter for like what's good and bad because of like the drop in quality. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. These videos did generate a lot of income for me, saving for like summer trips and all that. So yeah, I really appreciate you watching these videos. Yeah, this was fun, and I'll see you next time.